Yashodanandana Vrajajana Ranjana Yashodanandana Vrajajana Ranjana Yamuna Tiravanachari Yamuna Tiravanachari Jayo Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Rama Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare Jaya Jaya Gurudev Gurudev Jaya Jayo Kodanikai Maya Poshashi Kodanikai Maya Poshashi Kodanikai Jaya Maya Poshashi His congruent ki Jai Shri Bhagavad ki Jai Shishi Kodanikai Maya Poshashi ki Jai Gopi So, reading from Srila Prabhupada Lilamrita, this is a chapter entitled Chant Hare Krishna Room 5. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. So Prabhupada is saying, you will be very much pleased to know He continued that in 1967 I introduced Rath Yatra in San Francisco, and it's been going on continually for the last 9 or 10 years. And the government, they have fixed up a holiday for Rath Yatra. We have the 20th of July as a government fixed up holiday for Rath Yatra. And people take part in the Rath Yatra. Not only my devotees, but even outsiders. 10 to 12,000 people attend. And we distribute prasadam to all of them. They feel very much obliged. And the newspaper writes that people in general never felt such ecstasy as they are feeling in the Rath Yatra festival. The police say that the crowds in the Western countries, as soon as there's a big crowd, they create disturbance. But the police were surprised that this crowd is not a window-breaking crowd. Next, we introduced Rath Yatra in London, and in London, Trafalgar Square, it is the most famous square within the city. There is a big column called Nelson's Column. Our Rath was so high that the Guardian newspaper criticised this Rath Yatra as a rival to Nelson's Column. Next, we introduced Rath Yatra in Philadelphia, and last year we introduced Rath Yatra in New York, and we also have Rath Yatras in Melbourne and Sydney and in Paris. So in the Western countries, Rath Yatra is being introduced one after another, and Jagannath Swami is attracting the attention of the Western people. Suddenly some of the men on the stage began talking loudly among themselves in Oriya. Prabhupada stopped and turned and said, "What is that?" The talking subsided, and he continued, "So people will come in your Jagannath Puri now from all parts of the world. That is beneficial from various points of view. From the point of view of the tourist program, the government will benefit. When people are attracted to see Jagannath Puri, Jagannath Swami, that is good. But unfortunately, you do not allow these foreigners to enter the temple. How it can be adjusted? This stumbling block should be dissolved, that you want Jagannath Swami to be compact within your home, and you do not expand the mercy of Jagannath. He is Jagannath. He is not only Purinath or Oriyanath, he is Jagannath. So Jagat means universe, and Nath is Lord. So he's not just Lord of Puri or Lord of Oriya, but he's Lord of the universe. Krishna declares in the Bhagavad Gita, Bhaktaram Yagita Paisham Sarvaloka Maheshwaram. That is the definition of Jagannath, Sarvaloka Maheshwaram. So why you should deny the inhabitants of Sarvaloka the darshan of Jagannath? Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu never approved of such things. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said, Priti Vriti Yachi Yata Naragadin Gram Savatra Prachara Hoibi Muranam. When the thing is being done, and when they are eager to come here, why you should restrain? What is the cause? This is not very good. Srila Prabhupada continued to argue that foreigners who had taken to Vaishnavism should be allowed to enter the temple of Lord Jagannath. Offences to the Vaishnavas, he said, were condemned by Lord Chaitanya. Therefore, Prabhupada declared, he had come to Puri specifically to request the leaders to remove this offensive restriction and be friendly to the foreign devotees. He invited Puri's leaders to come and see the Jagannath and Radha Krishna temples all over the world and see how the foreigners had actually become pure Vaishnavas, strictly avoiding sinful life. No illicit sex, no meat eating, no fish eating, no egg eating, no intoxication, no gambling, said Prabhupada. Why you should not receive them as Vaishnava and give them proper reception? That is my request. I hope there are many learned scholars and devotees present here. They should endeavour to remove this restriction of short-sightedness, and let us combinedly work for Jagannath to preach the bhakti call for the benefit of the whole world. So there we go. So we're still not allowed in right now. Although my wife did sneak in actually, because she's Indian, you know. She had to just take her tilak off and look a bit kind of scuffed up. I had to wait for her. It was like a mountain of shoes. And she went in one end and I couldn't find her after that. And she reappeared about an hour later, but she was kind of in a kind of dazed ecstasy. But he's very big, Lord Jagannath, really massive. And he has a shalagram inside him. And every 4 years the body is changed. And a log washes up on the bank of the Jagannath Puri ocean. And he's called Daru Brahman. And then they carve the new Lord Jagannath from the Daru Brahman. And there's a little door in the back of Lord Jagannath, and they put a Damodar Shila, big Shalagram Shila, in the back of Lord Jagannath. And underneath Lord Jagannath, under the altar, is 100,000 Shalagrams. So amazing. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So this is a heavy one. If anyone is of a very light disposition, this could be a good time to leave. You could change your life forever just hearing this text. So it's Srimad Bhagavatam, it's Canto 5, Chapter 13. Rahugana converses with Jad Bharat. And its text... Oh, they both start with... It's text 11. Kvachik cha sita tapa vata vasha kvachik cha sita tapa vata vasha patri kriyam kartam anisha aste pati kriyam kartam anisha aste kachin mito vipanan yach cha kinchid kachin mito vipanan yach cha kinchid Vidvaisham Richati Uta Vita Shatyat Vidvaisham Richat Yuta Vita Satyat Chichasitapa Vatavasha Pati kriyam kartam anisha ashte Kvachin mito vipanan yachat kinchat Vedvaisham richat yuta vita shatyat Kvachich chashitapta vatavasha Prati kriyam kartam anisha aste Kvachin mito vipanan yachat kinchid Vidvaisham richat yuta vita shatyat Kashishcha shichatapa vatsasha Pati kriyam kartam anisha ashte Vachin vito vipanan yachat kinchit Vedvaisham richat yuta vita shatyam Kvachishcha shita tapa vatavasha Prakriti kriyam kartum anisha ashte Kvachin mito vipanam yachat Vidvaisham richat yuta vita shatyat Vachichat sita vatavasha Prakriyam kartam anisha aste Kachen mito vipanam yachat kinchit Vita Shatyat. Vashishya Shitatpa Vatavasha. Priyam Kartam Anisha Ashte. Vachinmito Vipananyas Chachit. Vidvaisham Richat Yutta Vita Shatyat. Vachishya Shita Tapa Vasha. Pratikriyam Kartam Anisha Aste. Vidvaisham Richat Yutta Vita Shatyat. Kvachit. Sometimes. Cha. Also. Sita Atapa Vatavasha. Of freezing cold, scorching heat, strong wind and excessive rainfall. Or Scotland. Pratikriyam. Counteraction. Kartam. To do. Anisha. Being unable. Aste. Remains in misery. Kvachit. Sometimes. Mita. One another. Vipanan. Selling. Yacha. Whatever. Kinchit. A little bit. Vidvaisham. Mutual enmity. Richati. Obtain. Uta. It is so said. Vita Shatyat. Because of cheating one another merely for money. Translation. Sometimes the living entity is busy counteracting the natural disturbances of freezing cold, scorching heat, strong wind, excessive rainfall, and so forth. When he is unable to do so, he becomes very unhappy. Sometimes he is cheated in business transactions, one after another. In this way, by cheating, living entities create enmity among themselves. So responsively, please. Sometimes the living entity is busy counteracting the natural disturbances of freezing cold, scorching heat, strong wind, excessive rainfall, and so forth. When he is unable to do so, he becomes very unhappy. Sometimes he is cheated in business transactions, one after another. In this way, by cheating, living entities create enmity among themselves. This is an example of the struggle for existence, the attempt to counteract the onslaught of material nature. This creates enmity in society, and consequently, society is filled with envious people. One person is envious of another, and this is the way of the material world. The Krishna consciousness movement aims at creating an atmosphere of non-envy. Of course, it is not possible for everyone to become Krishna conscious, but the Krishna consciousness movement can create an exemplary society wherein there is no envy. Om Ajnana Timiranda Shagananda Shalakaya Chakshramlitam Yena Tasma Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhastam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupakada Mayam Tadati Swapadantikam Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadha Shivasadi Gaura Bhaktarinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Ah. So I looked up once what envy means, and in the Thesaurus it refers to as the green-eyed monster. Anyone ever heard that before? The green-eyed monster? Yeah. Envy. And so people want they want to live in a nice, peaceful society. But unless you have a very strong communal spirit, how can you do that? If everyone's out for themselves. There's a problem with frogs. If you put frogs all in a tray and one frog tries to escape, the other frogs will drag it down because they don't want to see it escaping unless they can escape. So none of the frogs are able to get away. So in the same way, anyone tries to better themselves, other people become envious. Envious is an indirect compliment, actually. It shows the person admires you. But there's a difference between being envious and being jealous. If you're jealous, you just think, wow, I would like that car. But if you're envious, it means, why has he got that car? I should have that car. I'm much better than him. So envy is more insidious, subversive. Whereas you could be jealous and wish, I wish I could be like that, wish I could have that car. But you don't have anything against the person that's got it. You just think, well, it must be really nice to have a car like that. You must be so happy driving around in that car. But if that was the case, then all the people in the really, really big cars, expensive cars, they'd be super happy, right? And all the people driving around in little cars would all be really sad. But sometimes really happy people can be driving around in small cars. So anyway, it's a struggle for existence, and we tend to forget that it is a struggle for existence, and we cling to the illusion that everything's going to be okay, that we can nestle in to this material world and somehow create a permanent situation for ourselves. If we get a really big house and we have a big fence around it, then death won't be able to come in. I can protect myself from everything, including death. But of course, that's never happened yet, although people are trying to do it all the time. So, when it's a struggle, when something's a struggle, and then you just accept it, then the struggle finishes. So when you give up trying to be happy in the material world and accept that it's futile, and that you're going to have to leave this world at some point. Just like if you were in a waiting room, and you had all these people in the waiting room, and they're all waiting for their own destination. Everyone's train is going to come in at a different time, so everyone's death will be at a different time. But while they're in the waiting room, you're calling one your auntie, one your brother, one your mother, and then you start thinking of decorating the waiting room. And so you buy some paint, and you're not quite sure when your train's going to come in, but you're thinking it must be a while yet, because there's a lot of other people that have been here before me. But it's not necessarily that we're going to die in order. Anyway, so you start painting it and putting up some nice wallpaper and putting velvet on the seats, and everything's really comfy. And then the train comes in, and you have to hop off and get on the train. And the train's going to Gravesend. So one time, this devotee was saying, people are all worried about the future. What's going to happen in the future? What's going to happen in the future? And he says, well, I can tell you quite easily, although I'm not an astrologer. But everyone's going to grow old, and everyone's going to die. So why worry about the future? Because that's a fact. It's going to happen, you know. So rather than struggle, we give up the struggle. We decide, okay, so there's no point trying to make plans or build some empire. It's like a castle, a sand castle on the beach. Srila Prabhupada compared it one time. He said, Krishna is like the father, and he's watching, he has some children. Some of his children are playing, and Krishna's watching the children, and they're building sand castles. And Krishna's saying to them, don't do that. It's a waste of time. And you'll be really upset when the sea comes in and smashes them. And so they ignore him. They have their own ideas. And they build a big sand castle. And the sea comes in and smashes it. And they start crying and run to their father. And that's Krishna. He's just waiting. When are you going to stop playing around in the material world? Stop trying to make castles in the sand? And when are you going to turn back to me? And he's just waiting very patiently, because inevitably everybody does come to the point of material fatigue, where they decide, okay, that's it. I've had enough. I want out. But that can take a while. Sometimes you can become so used to living in the prison that the idea of leaving the prison is a threat to your existence, and you decide you're just going to stay in the prison. I know somebody that used to break the law just so he could go into prison, because at least in prison he would be looked after. So as soon as you have the desire, the strong desire to get out of the prison, then it's only a question of time. Once that desire is born, then there's no turning back. Because you can't go, once you realize you're in the prison, then you can't really just settle down and try and be happy again and just pretend everything's okay. Anyway, the struggle is there if you're fighting the reality and you don't want to accept, and you're trying to force your own agenda onto the environment. No, this is my plan, this is my desire, this should happen, that should happen. I'm going to work very hard to make sure it does. And if you don't manage it in this lifetime, then you come back and you try and fulfill the bucket list from your previous life. Although you may not even know why you have an intense desire for something in this lifetime, but it's from a past life. So one person is envious of another, and that is the material world. Because material world is where we come to try and be the enjoyer and the controller. And that's where everybody else has come also, to be the enjoyer and the controller. So you've got competition. So there's a competition for supremacy. And the Krishna consciousness movement aims at creating an atmosphere of non-envy. So that implies that that's not going to happen immediately. First of all, before we can give up our envy, we have to see that we have envy. And the way the false ego works is the false ego can rationalize and justify anything. Any unwarranted behavior or bad quality can be justified by the false ego. So the first enemy, the first obstacle, is how to get rid of the false ego. False ego is like the adhesive. If I dress Drew up to be Napoleon, and I glue Napoleon hat on him with super glue, and he's going around pushing everyone around in the prasadam queue, I should go first. I'm the emperor. And then we take some essential oil and smear it around the side of his hat. Then eventually it will eat away at the super glue, and then Drew will become a humble servant again, and he'll be just looking for some service to do. So Srila Prabhupada said that the sound of the Maha Mantra dissolves the false ego. So everything is solved if you can just get that Napoleon hat off. If you can just break your identity with the body, then all the problems are solved, because all the problems are pertaining to the body, the material body. How am I going to feed it? How am I going to make sure it feels safe? How am I going to soothe it, pacify it, reassure it, nourish it, protect it? And then suddenly, I'm not the body. Not that we neglect the body then, but then we're able to, if we're too attached to the body, then actually that becomes an impediment to maintaining the body nicely. They say that in America, no offense to any Americans, but they say that the average American plate is 1/3 too much that they're eating. So because of overindulgence, then that compounds upon their state of their health. The biggest killer in America is obesity. So by leading a life where you're more aware that you're not the body, you're actually able to maintain the body in a better way, keep it clean. They have a disease called couch fever. You heard of couch fever? They have these TV dinners, and they'll watch game after game after game, and sometimes they can be lying in the same position for 24 hours. I mean, probably go up to go to the loo, and then they're just having their TV dinner, and they're kind of lying as they're watching, and it forms blood clots on the lungs, called couch fever. So they go straight from the couch into the hospital. So by identifying yourself as being the body, it actually causes more problems than becoming aware that you're not the body, and then you can maintain it nicely. You can be detached from its urges and impulses, Vacha Vegam and Sakroda Vegam. In the very first text of Nectar of Instruction by Rupa Goswami, he says a sober person who can tolerate the urge to speak, the demands, the actions of anger, and the urges of the tongue, belly and genitals, is qualified to make disciples all over the world. Any questions or comments? Quite heavy. Maharaj Rahugana is getting it. He's getting the straight sauce. Both barrels from Chet Bharat. He's breaking all the illusion. The funny thing is that when you're in illusion about something and then somebody breaks that illusion, then you realize you were in the illusion. If you're intelligent enough anyway. Maharaj Rahugana, he's like really, really pleased that this illusion is being shattered. I mean, it must be a big illusion if you're a king and everybody's at your beck and call. I mean, people get into big illusion if they're just, good at kicking a football, or they can sing a song, or they play some part in a film, and that's totally intoxicating. But imagine if in reality you actually are the king, and everyone bows down to you, and it's really important. And then you become aware that the whole thing is an illusion. That for this lifetime you are, but next lifetime you may be king of the anthill. You may have to come back as the biggest ant. They say first of all deserve and then desire. So say you only have 50 quid and you really desire a car, and everyone's saying, I wouldn't bother for 50 quid, No. I must have a car. So with 50 quid, you'll come back with a banger, if you even can get one for 50 quid, but it won't have a lot of go in it. So if you're desiring something, just check first of all, well, do I have the pious merit to get this? Srila Prabhupada said, first deserve and then desire. So that's why sadhana bhakti, we do this whole devotional process, and it's to acquire sukriti, which is credit, so that we can have sufficient merit and adhikar, sufficient faith, to be able to accept the truth of the Bhagavatam. So I'll just read that translation again. Sometimes the living entity is busy counteracting the natural disturbances of freezing cold. Scorching heat, strong wind, excessive rainfall, and so forth. When he is unable to do so, he becomes very unhappy. Sometimes he is cheated in business transactions, one after another. In this way, by cheating, living entities create enmity among themselves. So the average person would maybe take offense to that. This is painting a very dark picture of material life. I'm not trying to cheat anybody. I'm just trying to earn an honest living. And I'm a nice person, and I'm very happy as well. I'm okay. Everything's fine. Got a nice wife, big house, nice car, good food in the fridge. I'm happy. So what would you say to a person who said that? What would you say, John? Someone. There was one time I was in London and we were doing books, and this devotee, he was from London, and he said, excuse me mate, passing these books out today, and they show you how to get free from suffering. And the man said, I'm not suffering. And he goes, excuse me, sir, I'm a little bit new at this. And he turned around to me and he goes, what do I say? Guy's like, I'm okay, I'm not suffering. So what would you do if somebody refused to accept that he wasn't unhappy? Maybe unhappy later. Well, maybe I will and maybe I won't, but right now I'm fine, so I'm not going to let that worry me. I'm going to look on the bright side. I'll take it as it comes. Everything's fine. I'm A-okay. Making loads of money. Got loads of friends. People think I'm great. Life's fine.
So I had an experience like this where I was in a materially blissful relationship, nice home, holding galleries for people, thought we'd be together forever, beautiful, perfect, everything was sunny, happy, and then there came a point of realisation that actually there's more to life than this. And so it was almost like saying that to myself, one part, saying to the other part. And through a process of time, coming to a place of lovingly separating to allow space, because he wasn't interested in spiritual life. So even though the love is deep, there's something more important, to have God in the centre.
Yeah.
And it was a really humbling experience of surrender.
Yeah, it's interesting because we change when we take up devotional service and we take up spiritual life. We change, and our priorities change, and who we are changes, and so people suddenly don't know us anymore because everyone is busy playing the part. You see, we're all playing the parts that our bodies are dictating us. So you have a body like this, so you must play this part. This is how people will see you. So you behave in that way. So your body conditions you to have a certain identity, your personality. And so you play your role. And then suddenly you step out of that and you take up Krishna consciousness, and then you go back to see the people, and then it's like, oh, who are you? Are you the same person that I thought I knew? And you're no longer the same person because you're not pretending anymore. You're not putting up a false... And it's like everyone's complicit with... When Srila Prabhupada came, he was like the little boy that said, the king is naked. Everybody is saying that the king looks great. Hasn't he got the most amazing clothes on? Because nobody wants to admit that they're unhappy, because then it implies that you're unintelligent, you see. So they say, only the most intelligent people can see the king's clothes. So, oh yeah, aren't they amazing, you know? And then one little boy stands up and says, the king is naked. And everyone burst out laughing. So Srila Prabhupada stood up and said, material life is miserable. And people, it's a fact actually, it is, you know, why are we all pretending, you know? So then you step out. And then other people feel threatened by that. It's like if everybody's smoking and you stop. I remember at work I stopped smoking and everybody was trying to get me to have a cigarette because it was like a threat to their... then they had to start worrying about whether smoking was okay, you see. And they just wanted to not worry about that and just get into it. So then you become a reminder that they've forgotten what's going to happen at the end of life. They've forgotten the important question, because you can't really say, oh, well, I don't believe in God and leave it at that, because you haven't proven it. It's like it's the most important conclusion to come to. And you're just going to put it to the side and say, well, never mind that, let's just get on with it, you know, let's just get into... But you're not going to be able to until you address that. If you can be fully convinced that there isn't a God, then you can go ahead and fully get into the material energy. And if you can be fully convinced he is there, then you can do the opposite. But you can't just leave it unresolved and then just kind of carry on with this like nagging doubt. Well, I hope this is going to be okay. I hope there isn't anything, you know. I remember when I was very young, I was maybe 3 years old, and I had this little spider and I was pulling its legs off, which was really horrible. And I was thinking, I wonder if there is a God, because if there is, I'm in big trouble. So there's this nagging doubt all the time as to, maybe I should find out first before I go around doing horrible things, or whatever I do, so at least I can be sure, And then the next thing is, well, who really knows? Nobody really knows, and you never really can know. As one philosophy was saying, God is so big that you can't get far enough away from him to see him. So there's no point trying to go down that road. You'll just have to hope for the best. And, we can just get into material life. And as long as we're not too bad, we should be okay, But that's a very kind of shady situation to be in. Very, very doubtful, really. And how can you? Krishna is saying in the Bhagavad Gita, there's no question of happiness until you're peaceful. So how can you be at peace with yourself if you don't really know what you're here for? And Srila Prabhupada made a very powerful statement. He said, either you accept that there is a God, or any other explanation is meaningless. So as soon as God goes out the picture, then the meaning goes out the picture. Because what's the meaning to anything anymore? There was just a void, a big black void, and then we popped up out of it by accident, and we're kind of just, bumbling around for a few years, and then back we go into the void. So what was the meaning to that? There's no meaning to anything. If there's no God and we've come from nothing, can we go back to nothing? Then that means there's no meaning. So you just pull the very vitality out of the human existence. You see, an animal, he can just go around sniffing things and mating and eating, and he's okay, it's like he's not really. But for a human has to reduce himself to the animal level if he's going to function and not address this very important question of, is there a God? And so then material nature says, well, you don't seem to be too keen on the human form of life, because you spend most of your time behaving like an animal. So what's the point in being in it? Let's just put you back into the body of an animal. And some people are really keen to get back into it, the body of an animal. They say, oh, I wish there was reincarnation, because I'd like to be like my cat. And my cat just sits around all day, and he's really fat, and he's not worried about anything, So that's what animal life is. So we have freedom of choice, but what we want is freedom from choice. Because freedom of choice implies culpability, accountability. You're responsible, Freedom from choice means nobody can blame you. That's animal life. You'll never see a dog up in court for stealing the sausages. Right? How do you plead? One woof for guilty, 2 woofs for innocent. You just know when he's a dog, how does he know? He sees the sausages, he's just going to go for them, isn't he? You just have to make sure the sausages are kept behind closed doors. It's your fault, it's not the dog's fault, you can't blame the dog. So people want to be like that, they want to be the dog. Can't blame me. Whether it's the sausages or the other man's wife or whatever it is he gets up to.
I was just thinking, to go back to your original question, what I'd probably say to somebody who was to respond like that was that through my experience of, for example, the example that I was giving, there's material happiness, blissfully happy, but in material consciousness,
Yeah.
and then spiritual happiness. And, Srila Prabhupada said, I instruct you to be happy. He didn't just say chant Hare Krishna. He said, chant Hare Krishna and be happy.
Yeah.
But the point is shifting, using the intelligence, gaining spiritual knowledge to shift the consciousness from material consciousness to spiritual consciousness.
Yeah.
And, the saying's really nice of before enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. After enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. It's not, there's 2 sides to that. It's important, for example, to come out of situations and come out of associations that are pulling you down. But at the same time, you perceived as mundane when you're in the spiritual life.
Yeah.
But they're actually not. They're on another platform. So it's about the focus.
Yeah, it's consciousness, isn't it? Paradigm. Changing your outlook, your perspective on things. And when I'm not on lockdown during a pandemic, I'm usually out and about, meeting Joe Public and giving them books and talking to them. And they have a bubble of material happiness which lasts for a certain period of time. But the nature of bubbles are that they always pop, and it's just a question of how long it takes before they do. And then the difficulty is that when the bubble does pop, is how do they cope with that? They can become very disorientated to the point where they don't really know what the next step is going to be, because they're starting to wonder, well, I don't think I want to get back into that again. It's like when people have pets and then the pet dies and they didn't realize it was going to upset them so much. We had 3 alpacas at one time, and I didn't think I was that attached, but when one of the alpacas died and he was in great pain, I was very upset. Actually, I was very disturbed. So the next thought that flashed into my mind was, after these alpacas are finished, let's not get any more, because I don't want to go through this again, you see. So with material life, how long does it last? You go through phases. So first of all, you're growing up and you can't really, establish anything, and then you go through getting an education, and then you earn some money, and then finally you get the ideal woman, the ideal house, and it's great, but how long can it last? It maybe lasts 10, 20 years, and then everything's starting to go down south, or everything's starting to hang on the body, and everything's creaking and freaking and squeaking, and it's not so fun anymore. So it lasts for a certain period, and the more you get into it, the more you accept it's going to be like this forever, the more upset you're going to be when it's not, and it won't be. It absolutely, definitely will not be. So you have the happiness of the ostrich who's put his head in the sand, and the other ostrich is looking, and he can see this tiger running at him, and you ask the 2 ostriches, "Are you happy?" And the one that can see the tiger saying, "Nope, I'm not happy at all, so I'm going to run like anything." And the other one has got his head in the sand. You say, "Are you happy?" And he says, "I'm so blissful. It is so amazing. It's such a comfortable hole, and it's just the right size for my head, and it's nice and warm, and the sunlight isn't disturbing me, and I can't hear the tiger, and everything's fine." So you can imagine when the tiger does finally. It reminds me actually, because we used to do these little skits, and one skit we haven't done yet, which I'd like to do, is the skit where the man is in a canoe and he's going down the river, and other people are also going down the river in their canoes, but they're facing a waterfall. There's a huge waterfall going to come up, and they're reading books on how to go over huge waterfalls, and they're practicing their different way that they're going to do it and how they're going to hold the side, and they've got little helmets on and they're getting ready for it, And the other guy, he's in the canoe. He's going backwards to the waterfall, and he's got a big LCD screen, and he's watching a film, and the people are shouting over, "Hey pal, massive waterfall." And he's saying, "Do you mind? I'm trying to watch the film. I'm quite happy. You don't have to disturb me. I'm okay. Now everybody's going to go over the edge, even the ones who are facing it and who have practiced. But you can imagine how unpleasant it's going to be if you're watching a film going down a waterfall backwards. The first thing that's going to happen is you're going to smack your head right onto rocks. You're going to get knocked for a 6, So that type of happiness is a very, very foolish type of happiness. There's Shreyas and there's Prayas. So Prayas is immediate happiness, and Shreyas is long term. I'm looking at how I'm going to be happy long term. I'm not going to just delight in the moment. And Gita explains that as well. Sparshabhoga, that a learned person does not take part in the sources of misery, which will come to an end. So he understands that. So he doesn't get into it. He doesn't delight in fleeting pleasure, because it's just a distraction from what's coming up, you know. And you need to practice. You need to have like strong muscles, and as you're coming up to the edge, Haribo, you know that the holy name is on your lips as you leave, and then everything's fine, you know. So that's what we're doing. We're preparing, and as we're preparing, Krishna will give us little wake-up calls and just checking out. We're going in. We're building ourselves up. We're getting stronger, so that we're ready for that final moment, you know.
Nice. There's another pastime comes to mind as well, that's really lovely about. I can't remember who exactly. Maybe you can help to remember it, but there's a yogi, a personality who there's a chasewoman, and he really wants to have her, and so he goes, and I think he requests from her father to marry her, and she says, just give me 7 days.
Oh yeah.
And
Liquid beauty.
yeah, exactly. So she fasts, and she basically like has a pot full of vomit and a pot from things that she's passing from her body anyway.
Yeah.
So the thing about material consciousness is it really reveals itself, because then the guy comes back after 7 days, and he's like, where's this beautiful woman? You know, he's looking on the external, and he's furious. You know, it's actually like, it's the difference between, is it Brahma Bhuta and Jiva Bhuta? You know, looking with like a particular kind of vision that's materially based,
Yeah.
or actually a spiritual vision.
Yeah.
It goes along with Preya and Shreya.
Yeah, we do the drama. I play the woman, actually. I am that beautiful woman you fell in love with. And he goes, well, take me to the beauty. And he goes, oh, you'll find the beauty over there in those pots. And she says, do you think you can still enjoy my beauty now? So you make a nice thing, but you make it out of stool and vomit. Okay, it looks nice. And because there's some skin around it, it looks nice. But as soon as you go under the surface, that's what's there. So that's the illusion.
Srila Prabhupada made a joke about this, saying that, you know, you like material life, the body, matter, well, it's just stool and vomit.
Yeah. Yeah, so that's a bit intense for people in general, but for ourselves. The body has 9 gates, and they're constantly excreting foul substances. There's 9 entrances into the body. And then there's the prostitute as well, Pingala. She says, only a fool like me could think that she could find pleasure and happiness in this contraption. And then she renounces it, she gives it all up, you know. So, that's the illusion. And if we have a desire to get free from the illusion, then it means we're on the anatta nivritti stage, which means we're wanting to get rid now of unwanted things. But it's getting people onto that stage because they're still wanting things which they shouldn't want. So anatta nivritti is the stage where you start to become familiar with the knowledge, and then you start to say, okay, this is not going to be good. And you start becoming aware of it. That's called sambandha jnana. That's the first stage. Accumulate the knowledge, and then realize, okay, it looks good, but actually it's not. Okay, I'll finish there. ISKCON Govinda ki, Srila Prabhupada ki, Nitai Gaura Premanandi, Hari Hari Bol. Go.